Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Kim, and I hope you're having a fabulous day today. If you are interested in true crime like I am, I hope that you'd consider hitting that subscribe button. But either way, thanks for being here. I'm officially in Michigan, freezing my buns off. That is why you see that the background is changed. I'll be here for a couple of weeks, so hopefully it's not too noisy and it looks okay. But we can adjust along the way, so just let me know. Today, we are going to be talking about a case that has little to no coverage. Heaven Watkins. But today, we're focused on Heaven. Heaven was only 11 years old when her life was taken away in an unspeakable manner. I found Heaven's story important not only because she has almost no coverage, but because her case changed laws within CPS in Virginia. Let's talk about Heaven Watkins. Warning, today we're going to be talking about another very crimey child case. If you are sensitive to said topic, I will see you in my next one. Heaven Watkins was born in St. Paul, Minnesota on April 14, 2011. Her parents, LaToya Smith, and her father, Joaquin Watkins. When Heaven was born, she was what they called a micro-preemie because she only weighed 1 pound 7 ounces. Tiny little thing with a fight for life like no other. She spent 3.5 months in the NICU unit. She had hydrocephalus, which is buildup of fluid in the cavities within your brain. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And she had a brain hemorrhage, a type of stroke which causes bleeding in the brain. Heaven had a survival rate of less than 10%. After the NICU, she went home with her mom, and she was later diagnosed with cerebral palsy and autism. Heaven spent most of her short life fighting to live. Heaven lived with her mom and dad and her 2 sisters in Minnesota until she was 7 years old. Even though Heaven survived being only less than 2 pounds when she was born and cerebral palsy, Heaven was tasked with surviving her abusive parents. In 2015, CPS removed Heaven from her mother and father's custody for several reasons. Heaven had told her teachers that her father, Joaquin, hit her, and the teachers noticed a bloody lip. They were also worried about sexualized talk and behaviors, although this was never proven. When Heaven was asked about said topic, she would shut down and she really just didn't want to talk about it. Dad Joaquin sold drugs from the house and kept weapons in the home as well. In the CPS document that I found, it states that Joaquin would put drugs in a glass jar, put it in one of the other kid's backpack so the kid could deliver it for him. Due to the abuse, Heaven was removed from the home. For a short time, Heaven had been placed in emergency foster care, but they were not equipped to deal with Heaven's issues surrounding her cerebral palsy and autism, so Heaven was in desperate need of placement. Heaven's father, Joaquin, called his sister, Sharonda Orridge, who lived only 6 houses away from where Heaven was removed by CPS, and asked her if she would be willing to take in Heaven. Her aunt jumped at this chance. She cherished her niece and was up for the task. When Heaven came to live with her aunt, she was extremely underweight, malnourished, was wearing diapers, needed leg braces but didn't have them. She hadn't seen a doctor in almost 1.5 years. She desperately needed to see a dentist, and if that wasn't enough, Heaven needed glasses. Heaven had been seriously neglected. Her aunt said when she first got the call, she figured Heaven would be with her, for a short time while, the parents got their stuff together, and then they would be returned home. Then when Heaven got there and she saw how much they were not taking care of her, she never wanted her to leave. You guys, Heaven was 7 years old at the time. Heaven couldn't even walk. She wasn't potty trained, and this wasn't due to her health issues. This was pure neglect And this is how we know. The family pitched in. Her grandmother taught her to walk. Her aunt taught her how to use the bathroom. They got her glasses so she could finally see. She learned to read. They started physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. She gained 40 pounds of much needed weight. They got her leg braces to help her walk. So no more wheelchair, no more diapers, none of that. With all of this care given to Heaven, Heaven was ready to start kindergarten. Her aunt Sharonda gave an interview, which I will link below in the description. She described Heaven as very chatty. They would have to play a game, the quiet game, to get her to stop talking, which of course Heaven won every time with encouragement. She would continue to say that Heaven loved smooth jazz and that she could scat, which she learned from music therapy. Here's a little clip. ABC. She loved tape, literal Scotch tape. I remember when I would buy my daughter like the biggest, best toy ever, and she only wanted to play with the cardboard box that it came in. Heaven liked candy and Hall's cough drops. Her favorite colors were pink and purple. Heaven enjoyed her friends and playing outside every chance she got. Everyone loved Heaven and her infectious smile. At school, Heaven struggled sometimes, but the longer she stayed with her aunt, she was provided consistency, and through that, the better off she did. Heaven was a regular in the nurse's office, so they would put a little VIP sign on the chair specifically for Heaven, which is adorable. Heaven's mom started coming around the aunt's house. The aunt said she could see a noticeable difference in Heaven's behavior when the mom would come around. The habits the aunt worked so hard to break started creeping back up. Heaven would always ask her aunt, "Are you gonna keep taking good care of me?" Which just breaks my heart. Sharonda, the aunt, knew that the focus of CPS and the state's agencies is family reunification. So she started doing everything she could in advance to help save Heaven from a home that the aunt knew was not a good home. The aunt joined a parent leadership group that works with CPS. She did a board of commissions training so she could get on different boards so she could form and shape policies for children. The aunt knew how important this was and really cared for Heaven, but her efforts would not stop there. She wrote multiple letters to all state and local authorities asking for LaToya, Heaven's mom, to have more time to get her act together before Heaven was placed back in her home. She wrote to Tony Clark, which is the county commissioner, Dolores Sanchez, which was Heaven's caseworker, Wendy Ross, who was Dolores's supervisor, Kimberly Clemberson, I'm probably slaughtering that, which was Wendy's supervisor. She literally wrote anyone and their bosses trying to get the inevitable from happening. Even with all her efforts, Heaven was returned to her mother's home. CPS gave back all of her children because she completed the tasks that were given. She was tasked as said things as having a drug-free home. The mom, LaToya, would have to see a therapist to help deal with her past trauma and the child protection involvement. LaToya and Joaquim had to submit UAs, which is a urine sample, to prove they were off drugs. Joaquim had to take some anger management classes, but from the report that I read at the time, they were in progress or have completed some task at the time. But by this point that Heaven was returned, Father Joaquim was no longer in the picture. That could be part of why LaToya got her kids back. You think this is good, right? Some of the horrible allegations were in regards to him. Don't get too happy. He's replaced with an even worse monster, but we will get there. When Heaven was placed back in her mother's care, the state of Minnesota CPS closed the case, so there wasn't any oversight shortly after she was returned, for whatever reason. So after Heaven was back in her mother's care, her aunt saw her a few times. She would drive by because she only lived 6 houses down for a short period of time, so she could see that she was outside playing, but but then she noticed that she really didn't see Heaven playing outside that much anymore. And the aunt would say that she couldn't see her a lot because Heaven always wanted to come home with her, and it broke her heart. It broke Heaven's heart. It was just too much to bear for both of them. Then one day, the bus showed up to the Aunt Sharonda's house. The bus driver said Heaven was being messed with again, so they thought she was going to be back at her aunt's house, but the aunt was completely unaware of anything. Then the aunt got a delivery of diapers and Ensure supplement drinks. Heaven hadn't needed diapers when she left the aunt's house. She had put on the weight, so she didn't need the drinks anymore. The aunt just panicked. These were all really bad signs. She knew once again they were not taking care of Heaven, so the aunt called Heaven's guardian, Ad Litton, to find out what was going on and was given basically no information. By this point, CPS saw the aunt as an issue. She was complaining too much. The aunt said she didn't report half of what she saw and let the teachers do it because she figured she would get a better reaction if the teachers did it because she was the problem. They saw her. Shortly after this, LaToya broke off all contact with the aunt and blocked her from Facebook. There was a friend of the family that was watching out for them, trying to keep them informed when they had any information. This is when the aunt found out that LaToya had moved Heaven to Virginia. The aunt in that side of the family just broke down. The Aunt Sharonda always felt a pit in her stomach, constantly worried about Heaven. Her aunt was scared all the time that something bad was going to happen. She looked for LaToya Smith and Heaven Watkins in the search engine every day. So Heaven is now moved to Virginia with her mom, but guess what? Mom has a new boyfriend, DeMont Harris. She didn't level up, you guys. I can definitely tell you that. According to court records, that February, just 3 months before Heaven's death, Heaven was admitted to the hospital for a week with severe burns on her hand. So bad, in fact, she needed skin grafts. LaToya said the boyfriend made everyone lie and say Heaven got the burn washing her hands in hot water. Everyone? Really? Hurt someone in my family and tried to make me lie. Not gonna happen. So Heaven got third-degree burns needing skin grafts because the water was too hot when she washed her hands. That is the story. Well, CPS bought it. Clearly that wasn't true. She had received these burns as a punishment because her hand was held under scalding hot water by LaToya's boyfriend, DeMont Harris. Oh, and by the way, DeMont Harris was considered her care worker. So he was being paid to be her CPA, personal care assistant. Residents of Virginia, you're going to have to ask for your tax dollars on that one. I wonder what the criteria is for a PCA. How did he get that role? This incident was investigated by Norfolk CPS, and the allegation of child abuse was not found by them. The file was closed. Even after this, on April 10th, LaToya posted that she was engaged to DeMont. She knew this man burned her child so badly that she had to stay in the hospital and get skin grafts, and this is who she wants to marry. This brings us to May 18th, 2018. Norfolk Fire and Rescue were called to the 100 block of Bellevue Ave to an unresponsive 11-year-old girl. The paramedics declared Heaven gone as soon as they arrived. Outside the house, neighbors were taking care of Heaven's two sisters, keeping them away from the apartment. The neighbors said the family had only lived there for less than a month, but they knew Heaven and really liked her. She was friendly and a sweet girl. The neighbors said that LaToya was crying inconsolably. My opinion, those tears were not for Heaven. The neighbors would say that both LaToya and DeMont said Heaven died from natural causes, and with the child with cerebral palsy, the neighbors didn't know any better. So the neighbors said they stayed up all night with the pair there, drank and cried with them for hours. Apparently, the family had only lived in the apartment for, like I said, less than a month. So the neighbors did see some bruises on Heaven, but they chopped it up to seeing her fall because they saw her fall often as well. But within a couple days, Mom and Dad were arrested. The community were stunned, to say the least. They held a vigil for Heaven. They also released pink and purple balloons, as those were Heaven's favorite colors. Remember the Aunt Sharonda? She found out on Facebook that Heaven had been killed. That is so messed up. LaToya posted on our personal Facebook page on the Saturday morning, the day after Heaven's death, "My daughter Heaven passed away, baby RIP," with a photo. It wasn't an alone photo of just Heaven. No, it was all 4 of her children. She had a son that lived with her aunt in Minnesota, a different aunt. Side note, the only reason I think she didn't give up Heaven is because she was bringing in income. Because I was thinking she didn't mind her son living elsewhere. Why was she hanging on to Heaven? Then the light bulb came on. Money. The hardest part of this story, Heaven was taken into the medical examiner's office. They immediately noticed many signs of abuse. They continued with their examination but alerted police that they were looking at something other than natural causes. There was nothing natural, in fact. The medical examiner found what they called classic hallmark of abuse: 23 rib fractures, a minimum of 4 previous traumatic events, bleeding on the brain, extensive external bruising to the forehead, cheek, and chin, a fractured humerus bone beat so badly her small intestine burst, 12 to 13 old fractures, 2 to 3 new ones. Her cause of death: internal injuries and blunt force trauma. Initially, they interviewed the parents on May 18th, the day that Heaven passed away. They both said there was no abuse in the home. So a couple days later, both LaToya and DeMont were arrested on May 20th, just 2 days later. LaToya admitted that, quote, "She was being abused, putting hands on her again. And also I was feeding her bread too for the past couple of days." Unquote. LaToya, the mom, said the night before Heaven's death, she smacked her daughter in the face while she was in the tub. Someone commented on my last video that there is always a bathtub involved. I'm starting to agree. She also said DeMont punched Heaven 3 or 4 times in her back because she soiled her diaper. LaToya also said that there were instances when she herself denied Heaven food as punishment for acting up at school or at home, and that DeMont hit Heaven when she soiled her diaper because he couldn't stand the smell. Another punishment included making Heaven stand in a corner for hours. LaToya said she was punished every time she got into trouble, which was 2 or 3 times a week. So they were both charged with second-degree murder. In Virginia, being a Commonwealth state, unless a crime has intent behind it and can be charged as first or capital murder, if not, then it's second degree. On October 30th, 2019, DeMont Harris pled guilty to felony homicide and 2 counts of child abuse neglect for the burn that Heaven received earlier, because after Heaven died, they reopened that case and charged the couple with that injury. If that isn't reactive versus proactive, I don't know what is. Regardless, he was sentenced to 60 years with 35 suspended. LaToya pled guilty to felony murder and 1 count of child abuse neglect because of the earlier burn to Heaven. On October 7, 2020, she was sentenced to 50 years with 20 years suspended. One good thing that came from this is Heaven's law. Remember, Heaven had been removed from her mom's care in Minnesota, so if Virginia had reached out to other states looking for old child abuse cases when they were doing their investigation for the hand burn, it might have been prevented had they have known this information. When police asked LaToya why she didn't stop DeMont or do something about what he was doing to her own daughter, she only responded, I don't know. She was going to marry this man. She knew and didn't care. And if I'm totally being honest, she was abusing her alongside of DeMont. Child abuse was happening long before he came into the picture, in my opinion. Police asked LaToya to take them back to the night before Heaven died. She said DeMont punched Heaven twice in the chest and once in the stomach. Did this slip her mind when her daughter was deceased, pulling away from her house? When she was hanging out with DeMont, partying with the neighbors? They are equally as responsible, in my opinion. So Heaven's law explained is that the caseworkers are required to look back 5 years in an investigation to see if a child has been neglected or abused in another state. This should have thrown up a big red flag for CPS in Virginia looking into the hand burn, so they could have taken it more seriously. It was signed into law on July 1st, 2019 by Governor Ralph Northam. You wonder if Heaven pushed those odds of 10% survival rate when she was born, knowing she was going to make a difference one day, or just God had another plan. There's still a nationwide push that would require the Department of Health and Human Services to create a national interstate data exchange system.
By breaking down barriers to information, we can prevent children like Heaven from slipping through the cracks.
Even if Virginia CPS wanted to check abuse records in Minnesota, there's no easy way to do it. The Stronger Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, or CAPTA, that is making its way through Congress, changes that. It requires the Department of Health and Human Services to create a national interstate data exchange system. The program would allow states to share information from their child abuse and neglect registries with other states. That way, caseworkers would have more background when making these life or death decisions.
Had this data exchange system been in place last year, it is likely that we would have prevented the tragic death of Heaven Watkins.
Heaven's mother pled guilty in the case. Her boyfriend is still awaiting trial. Now, almost a year after Heaven's death, this bill could be the little girl's legacy as it heads to the House floor.
The system allows states to share child abuse and neglect information with other states, which gives caseworkers more background. Think about that for a moment. A driver's license, they check other states. Criminal history, multiple states. CPS, we're working on it. And this is the information of February 2020. So although a caseworker is required to follow up with each known state, if the parent doesn't say which states they lived in before, there will be no calls made. I heard that there was a lot of bureaucracy within CPS, but this is the first time I have seen actual evidence. They are so close-lipped about the ins and outs of what goes on. CPS workers are only as strong as the system that supports them. Caseworkers cannot handle 30 cases and call all 52 states for information. Not to mention that there's complaints that the classification of child abuse is different from state to state. These are the complaints I hear online from social services. I get it, but let's look at the big picture. Any information is better than no information. Please weigh in with your opinion. This case is maddening, and poor Heaven has no news coverage on her very sad case. Her death changed laws to improve CPS in Virginia. Not to mention, she saved her two sisters that were in a terrible home. Let's make sure Heaven gets the coverage she deserves. Leave a pink heart for her favorite color. Actually, leave a pink and purple heart. Multiple comments. Flood it. Plus the like button. Share. Recommend to your favorite true crimer to do a video on Heaven, not only for Heaven, but for the CPS involvement. I emailed all my favorite true crime YouTubers to see if they would be interested in covering this case. I want to get as many people aware of her case as possible because other states need to follow suit with Virginia, if they haven't already, to ensure that checks are being done properly. Thanks so much for listening to Heaven's story. Thanks to all my channel members who continue to support me. Their names are on the screen. If you would like early access to new videos and decide the cases I cover next, you can do so by clicking the join button from your desktop, or there is a video in the description box on how to do it from your phone. Well, if you guys have made it to the end, you guys are rock stars and I love you to death. There are more true crime videos in my Crimey Stories playlist for you to check out. Stay safe, my loves, and remember, if you see something, say something, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.